Welcome to the Money School podcast for October 15th, 2020. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. Sorry I've been away on the podcast. Been doing a lot of live streaming. Really appreciate your support on that and all the positive feedback. For the last month, almost every single trading day we've been doing live streams, and those are all up on YouTube to watch from the beginning. Every trade fully transparent. And that's been great. I love seeing the screenshots from everybody, people making money and getting into the market, messages from people saying, I bought my first stock or I got started. I love that. That's why I do all of this, is to get people to get going and to start, adopting that investment mindset. So we started doing this a few months ago and have rolled out the podcast and the live stream, and everything has been really well received. I really appreciate you guys. So wanted to start with that and then jump into just, the crazy stuff we got going on. It's been a few weeks since I've checked in. Did that TikTok deal ever close? I mean, what a nightmare. We're not going to deal with that. I wanted to get into more important stuff. One of the things I think that's driving the market right now more than anything is ballots are going out around the country. Early voting is starting. And the news cycle is just intensifying with, just so many headlines that we're going, all over the place, half hour by half hour in the market. Good news, bad news, fake news, real news. The waters are so muddy. I don't think a lot of people can really, see anywhere with much clarity. So markets are just a little bit more volatile. I think long term, it's a good time to stay invested in stocks. I'm personally fully invested, but I'm definitely prepared for some volatility. As far as the stock market goes, there's a couple specific stories that I wanted to get to in terms of why I do or don't own specific stocks as they relate to the election and the news cycle process that now governs, a lot of the stock market. So, Twitter and Facebook over last night, yesterday, and yesterday evening, the New York Post posted the article about Hunter Biden and Joe Biden's family. I don't know if it's true. I don't know if it's fake. Apparently, it's elements of it are fake news. Who knows? How it's relevant to the market and what I care about is the speech debate that puts Twitter and Facebook front and center in the middle of all of this. Whether that story is true or not shouldn't be up to Twitter or Facebook to decide. They're just not equipped to do that. But there's also an issue with, misinformation spreading, whether it's that story or other stories. And that's going to become really intense over the next couple of weeks with Twitter and Facebook. The left saying that, they're censored, the right saying that they're censored, people in the middle being disgusted with just, the movie. I think the Social Dilemma, a lot of people have watched that and have responded, really negatively towards specifically Facebook. I don't think they're as worried about a Twitter algorithm or I don't think people are mad at the TikTok algorithm. People are specifically really mad at Facebook for how it has impacted their personal relationships and their mental health. And, I think the comparison is the movie There Will Be Blood, and he's an oil prospector, and he's taking his son, he's teaching him how to prospect for land, and he's looking for oil on hunting grounds and trying to get a better price. And he says, we're not going to pay oil prices, we're going to pay quail prices. And, trying to trick the person to sell their information or what they have for less. And we've moved from a fossil fuel economy, 100 years ago, or, a little before that, to an information age. And what Facebook did and what social media did was just hijack all of our data, and they paid us quail prices for our, should have been oil prices. So now we've been, totally compromised with all of our security, And they've made literally billions of dollars a month for the last several years selling ads against, manipulating us. And I think that there's a lot of outrage that has come to the forefront of just the social consciousness right now. I don't think Instagram feels that as much, but Facebook proper has a lot of issues with advertising and engagement, and it just becoming a place that people exceedingly start to push away from. So Twitter and Facebook are two stocks that I think people will be platforms that will be in the headlines, and those are things that I just do not want to own for at least the next month. Kind of tangentially, Google and Amazon are in that same boat, but slightly different. But in terms of Amazon has a lot of battles coming up in terms of their employees being hurt on the job, the richest guy in the world having, so much wealth versus other. I mean, there's wealth gap issues, there's workplace safety issues, there's monopoly issues, there's the inappropriate behavior with third-party sellers and then essentially extorting them or creating basics that they put on top of the search. And then the political ties between the Pentagon and Amazon and Google, and just like there's a lot of different battles that these companies are fighting on a lot of different fronts. And I think that whenever you have the richest guy in the world and what people perceive to be an evil tech company in Google, I mean, people are neutral or negative on Google, even if they love the product. If you ask them about the actual company, it's like, yeah, they have way too much data on us. Those two companies, I think, are going to be called in for congressional hearings, anti-monopoly. Both sides of the political aisle will try to score political points by attacking them both. So Twitter, Facebook, Google, Amazon, even though they're great companies long term, I mean, from a profit standpoint, not great in terms of whatever they do, but just in terms of making money, they print a ton of cash. But for the next month, I think they're going to be really volatile. And then the other two with that, Apple and Microsoft, it feels like they somehow are outside of that pressure as much. And maybe that's because they've cooperated with the government more in the past, or whatever it may be. But Apple and Microsoft seem to be dodging the monopoly question much more than Facebook and Google, Amazon, because I think it's because, Amazon's anti-monopolistic people puts people out of job, destroys jobs, and it is potentially bad for workers and consumers. So that's a really important one. If Google gets broken up into an anti-monopoly type of situation, I think the prize there is YouTube. It's better fully integrated probably, but those are just five, six big stocks that it's just for this next month, I kind of want to press pause on. As this early voting continues, like really this end of October, the election is 2 weeks away, but most people are going to vote, and there's going to be a huge vote by mail and a huge early voting push on both sides. People are going to be out and be voting now, and I think that's why you're seeing a real big push for a lot of political ads right now, whereas maybe in the past they would have focused those ads towards the tail end of the election right before the vote. But I think they're just kind of on the verge of like, let's cancel these debates and let's just do the damn thing already. And I think that's where the country is at. I don't think there's anybody that's undecided. I think there's people that are engaged on one of the two parties. There's a small group that is disengaged and believes in a third party. And then there's a huge group that's just totally disengaged from anything political. I think all of those parties know what they want to do and are ready to just do it. So I think they're going to do it quick, and I think the big money knows that, and they're dumping a bunch of, for lack of a better word, a bunch of bullshit on the entire news cycle, and it's going to be really murky for everybody. Everybody's going to have a bunch of opinions on a bunch of other things. I think it's really important to think about 6, 12, 18 months down the road. look through this election and own things that are going to continue to grow with either outcome. And that's how I've started to position the Money School portfolio. And I think that being nimble in your portfolio and staying invested and staying long is really important. But being able to pivot what you own and being able to take more or less risk is really important for a portfolio, and you can do it. It's easy and it's free. So that's what we're doing at the live stream on the Money School portfolio every day, and you can kind of see how I actually do that and implement that in a real money portfolio. So you never want to overtrade your portfolio, and I never want to look at things too short term, but the election is such a huge outcome that it's just so important to so many different people that there is just a lot of money being spent just to manipulate whatever can be manipulated on either side. So that's going to create waves that long-term are an opportunity. The market's down today. I think if you're a long-term investor, it's a great time to pick some stocks up into the negative, the negative red days. So if you stay positive and stay invested, that's the way to be long-term. But being nimble enough in the short term to kind of, if we can avoid some landmines. I'm not trying to wake up every day and have Jack Dorsey apologizing for how they handled, censoring and being in now having just like a frenzy on their hands. They're down more than the market, Facebook and Twitter today. And, then you got Ted Cruz calling to get Jack Dorsey in, for a congressional hearing, like literally the next day. So it's like, they're just trying to score points on social media, but it will lead to real life congressional hearings that are just, they always do that dance, but eventually these CEOs are going to get caught up because there's been about 10 congressional hearings in a row with the tech industry where the tech CEOs just basically run circles around these, members of Congress, these oversight committees, and they embarrass them. At a certain point, the government is going to come in more prepared, and they're going to catch these tech companies slipping up or saying some what they're not supposed to say in front of Congress. Like, that's going to happen at some point. Emails are going to get leaked. There's just too much at the line for people not to switch sides or for things not to come out. So it's just a political risk that you always have by holding those companies that have that bullseye on them. That's enough about that. Wanted to hop into a couple of other areas. One of those being the real estate market, both nationally and what we're experiencing. I own a real estate brokerage in Oregon and Washington. We're mostly in Portland and Southwest Washington, but we're everywhere in both states. We have a really wide view of what's happening with the market and, with demographics and people moving around. I think it's just fascinating what's happening because we've gone from, people being tied to a certain location to do their job a year ago to now an assumption that we're going to be in a work from anywhere type of environment for most of the economy. We've seen just a huge shift in terms of a lot of people have been moving from California for a few different reasons. A big driver of work from anywhere. If you can work from wherever, you're going to naturally seek out places where you're going to pay less taxes on that income. And we've seen a huge boom of people leaving California and moving, their businesses to Nevada, Texas, Arizona, Tennessee to a lesser extent. A lot of people from New York moving to Florida, and then people moving from California to Washington. And what's happened in Oregon is the markets have cooled off and they've started to lag because as people move from California and their main decision is, I want to get rid of this 13%, income tax. If they're looking at Oregon and it's 10.5 and they're looking at Washington and it's 0, they're just skipping Oregon completely. So the California relocation trend that had been driving Oregon for a bunch of years has slowed down because now you can't deduct the SALT taxes the same way. And now that you're work from anywhere, you're just the income tax difference is really, putting pressure on the real estate market. We're seeing that happen from a lot of high tax states, people just moving towards either the middle of the country, moving to Idaho. Boise and Austin, Texas are the two busiest markets in the entire country right now. And a big part of that is the taxes. So what COVID has done has accelerated every trend imaginable. Anything that you were planning on doing in the next 5 years, you're doing it now. And whether it's the road trip you're taking or the job change you're taking or the, new path you're going to start, whether you wanted to do it or you're being forced to do it, there's a lot of people making big life changes right now. It includes, just a huge migration of people. It's fascinating to watch. And as a real estate brokerage, we've just been record month after record month after record month. And a big part of that is people, moving up and moving around and moving into, the Southwest Washington side. We don't have any income tax, and we've just continued to boom with a lot of, relocation and people moving up with houses they bought 5 years ago that are now up, huge percent, and they're just rolling their equity up. My concern with the market is the tail end, because there's a lot of people in the economy that are about to get left behind over the next 3 to 6 months. I just think that the wealth gap is going to become, further exacerbated by the COVID situation, by extended shutdowns. The people that get hurt in that are, a lot of the working class. And I think that the working class, as housing prices accelerate, we've been averaging, in the United States, the average is about 5% year over year in housing price growth. We're almost at 8% in Southwest Washington. That's an acceleration up from, about 5.5%, 6% in most of our areas. So even over the last month, we've accelerated up to, almost 8% price growth. And mortgage rates are under 3%. So we're seeing prices grow. Mortgages are cheap, but the reality is a big part of that is people that are buying houses are rolling over a ton of equity that they've already made in their house. And what I'm always concerned about, what I want to see more of, are brand new market participants, people that are buying stock and people that are buying real estate for the first time. The amount of people that are doing that in the economy is really critical. How many people are in the process of, accruing wealth, that are participating in these markets for the first time? Because for the last 10, 15 years, it's been a really small group. A really tiny population owns all of the stock and owns all of the wealth. And, that trend is going to continue to be pretty brutal for a lot of folks, I think, coming up. We still have about 15 million unemployed from the initial shock of job losses. The continuing claims aren't great. And we're starting to hit rent moratoriums, and a lot of that stuff is expiring. And people are starting to feel the heat. They're really starting to feel the pressure. And the less money you have, the more you feel that pressure. And it's just how life works. So part of the reason why I spend so much time on the money side is because that's how I feel like I can contribute to help alleviate that pressure in people's lives by preparing more, having more, just more flexibility. At the end of the day, money just is really time and flexibility. Your margins are better. When you have money, a speeding ticket doesn't cost you as much, or, having a health incident costs you less. There's going to be a big difference of people that have healthcare and who don't have healthcare. That's a lot of people in our country that are either not insured or underinsured. There's a lot of 1099 workers. All the Uber drivers that are laid off that, just now don't make any money. And a year ago, this time, we're making great money. But the demand for those services has gone down, and a lot of those businesses, they didn't have health insurance. So there's a lot of issues that, this health crisis, which, we already have a housing crisis in terms of shortage and homelessness and affordability. And to now layer that on top with people not making stable income and having credit impacts and having debt pile up, it's a concern that we have to pay attention to as a society. We have to make sure that we don't leave an entire. That's what's too big to fail. The banks aren't too big to fail. The group of people that are on a razor's edge, that group is too big to fail. So we have to really protect. I'm not talking about socialism or anything crazy, but we have to be really conscious of the fact that people that are, the stats of who has $500 for an emergency and stuff like that is heartbreaking. So we can only control what we do ourselves. So if you have extra money in those moments where you have extra money, it's your duty to save and to continue to, grow your money. So when you need it, it's available. And if you get to a point where you have excess, then you'll have the ability to help people around you. The real estate market becoming out of reach for people is something that I'm constantly concerned about. I've been a real estate broker for 12 years. I started for 11 years, started right after the housing crisis. So I've seen the worst of the worst, and it's heartbreaking. And I really hope that we never go back to that. And I think that our strongest possible economy is to get more people to participate in a way where they're not desperate. Real estate seems to be accelerating in a way where it's definitely accelerating faster than people's wages are. And rubber is going to meet the road at some point. So there's a lot of people that are crushing it in the economy, and they're doing great. A lot of those people were already crushing it, and they've accumulated wealth in the housing market, and they're rolling that up. And that's great. But what we really need for the economy to be strong is, again, those new, millennial and Gen Z buyers that are forming houses or buying stocks in real estate for the first time. And they've gotten the stocks part. Millennials and Gen Z, they're getting on board with buying stocks because it's easier with the technology. The real estate is still out of reach for a great many people, so of any age. So the real estate market accelerating with this huge boom is, that's a trend that's going to continue to go. And owning those stocks in the more suburban areas where people want more space, and they still want to be close to cities, but not too close. And they want a little bit more space, and they want to be able to, if their kids aren't going back to school, to have a space to, stretch their legs and to teach their kids. And people's homes are just at a premium now versus what they've ever been, because they need to be more for people. So real estate is a really fascinating market that it's probably the healthiest market we have in the United States. But I would love to see some type of just total tax credit or some type of stimulus that's directly applied to people that have never owned a home before. If they buy a home, or if you haven't owned a home for a few years, or if you lost your home in the last financial crisis, like if you get back on the ride, there needs to be an incentive to get new blood into the market. That's what's really going to take us higher. And that'll happen in time no matter what the politics are. There's just too many young people that are like millennials and Gen Z are kind of forming at the same time. I'm 33. I graduated from college in 2009. Most of my friends weren't able to buy a house until they were 28, 29, 30. Now this next generation, they're buying homes when they're 22, 23. That's happening more than when it happened at my generation, but in my opinion, it's never happening fast enough. So I just want to always keep an eye on how accessible the market is. And what we're seeing in Southwest Washington is less of an accessibility, no supply, which is going to get worse over the November, December months, because people don't want to list their house during a pandemic, during the holiday. So it's like we're already at very low inventory, and that's going to stay really low. And then as people have the demand to move, anything that comes up on the market is in a bidding war. So we're going to see those prices accelerate. And at some point, we're going to need some type of reconciliation, or we're going to need to figure that out, because it's going to be an issue that we're going to continue to deal with. They're not building more land. The other big news of the week with Apple is they just announced the new round of iPhones, the 5G rollout. Verizon just turned on their 5G. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. I think there's a good chance that a lot of this technology kind of falls flat for, I guess, lack of a better way to put it, for the short term. When 4G rolled out, there was too much 4G and not enough device. Now there's too much device and not enough 5G. This technology, just there's a better person to explain the technical part of it, but it's just harder to logistically roll out all of the repeaters and all of the towers and all of the actual infrastructure to roll out 5G. We're not there yet, and we're there almost nowhere. There's going to be pockets of it where it's excellent, but I'm really curious to see how that rolls out over the next, I guess the next several years. But 5G is here, it's announced. With Verizon turning it on, that really becomes, they're the major player. And with this new iPhone, I think the iPhone's going to be popular with or without the 5G. I think people will be kind of let down with the 5G part of it potentially in the short term. But the devices look great. The iPads look great. The watches, still look like the watches. The new HomePod at $99 seems a better deal than $300. I think they're late on that. If they don't fix Siri at some point, come on, Apple. Like, you got to fix your voice assistant, like way behind Alexa and Google. But the last round of announcements from Apple I thought were positive. The stock market wasn't super thrilled with them. I think that might be how the initial reaction is with the 5G. So I think kind of the trinity of stocks with that rollout is Apple and then Taiwan Semi, who actually makes the chips for both Apple. They make the A14 Bionic. They make the chip that is in the iPad and in the new iPhone. And they also make the chipset for Qualcomm's Snapdragon modem. Qualcomm's another company that's really critical to the 5G rollout. So Apple and Taiwan Semi and Qualcomm, if you're interested in that. I guess then also Verizon, but I don't like them as a utility as much. But that's one that I'm not invested in directly right now, but I'm keeping an eye on just because I want to see. Hopefully that rollout is faster than what a lot of people are anticipating. But the initial whispers is that the ultra wideband 5G that people are really going to be fired up about is going to be really limited for the next little bit. So that was something that I think it didn't help the market this week, just because Apple's so big that if the news is ever kind of so-so or negative, the market's going to be, choppy. So we're seeing that this week, but I still think it's a good time. Like, if you have fresh cash right now, to hop in and buy some stocks, at least get started. You don't need to go crazy, but dabble and start going, anytime the NASDAQ's down 1%, it's a good time to buy some stocks. And the last thing I wanted to close on for today is back to voting, but just in a different perspective. I think it's so critical that people become informed voters, and that starts at the ballot in a sense. And I think it's important to just be engaged with your local and state and federal politics and not be overwhelmed, just having an informed opinion on why you're doing what you're doing. But our ability to vote is too limited to just the ballot box. And that system is compromised and slow. And where you can vote every single day is with your money. And that's what I always think about when I spend my own money or when I invest my own money. And being conscious of that, I think, is really critical in today's world. Where are you spending your time, your energy, and your money? And where you spend those things is a reflection of who you are and just what you're about and the type of person you are. And being intentional is important. So where you spend your money, how you spend your money, the companies that you're voting on by supporting their business is important. And the same with your investments. Every dollar of your investments, that's a deep reflection of self. And some people don't invest, and that's a reflection. And some people invest in stuff they don't understand, and that's also a reflection. And then, my goal with my portfolio is, if you look at my portfolio, you understand me as a person and what I'm interested in and the ideas that drive me and the things that I hold to be true. And I try to spend every dollar either investing or in spending, voting on things that I believe in, that make sense to me, that are ethical and moral to me, that aren't hurting other people, that aren't damaging the environment. Because there's too many other ways to grow as people. We just need to continue to vote all the time. And sometimes that's just with speech. It's always with your money. And every few years, it's with your vote at the ballot box. So I don't know how people don't vote at home, to be honest. I've been spoiled. I'm a Washington resident. I just thought that's how people voted everywhere, to be honest. I didn't know that it was such an issue. But the way that most of the items are written, half the time, if I don't have the ability to sit with a voter guide or to Google it, half the time the way the things are written, it's hard to tell what you're even voting on. And that's frustrating. Double negatives, voting, just the ambiguity in it, and then the issues with matching signatures and stuff like that. Like, we need to get to a blockchain type of secure public open ledger voting where it's private, but it's just the integrity. We've lost the integrity in the system to vote in the public capacity. So I think that puts an enormous premium on voting with your dollars, buying the brands that don't hurt people, buying the brands that put people first, and buying the brands that care about you back. I think that's important because a lot of people spend their money on stuff where the company hates them. Like, they just have a track record of hating the people that they sell their stuff to. Like, when you look at it at any type of critical level, and that stuff's important. And why are they doing what they're doing and who is driving those companies? It's just, they're not just ticker symbols on a board. They're companies with real people that are driving ideas and making things real. The stock market is just a voting machine of ideas, and humans are placing their capital and putting their money on where they want certain ideas to go. That's why Tesla has, 1,000 times earnings, and nobody that owns the stock cares, because they're using their capital to build a future that they want, and they trust Elon to build it. And that's what he's doing. Maybe it'll work and maybe it won't. Maybe it'll be a good investment. Maybe it won't. But no matter what the stock market is doing is taking that capital from those people and using it to build something that they like more than cars that are running on fossil fuel. So, it's literally just a reflection of the demand of the people and what we want to build. And the stock market is a way to move that money around to those ideas and to build them out and make them real. So vote with your dollars, because the support of those companies or the support of small business is what helps them grow and thrive and to, create an economy that's diverse and strong and stable. And hopefully we can get to a point where we have shocks like this, where our healthcare is so strong and we don't need to shut the economy down, and we can just care for our people and not go broke and not have to, put $5 trillion on the Fed balance sheet because we have, a very bad, 8 months of disease. But part of the reason why this is so bad is because we've neglected it for so long. Part of the reason why we're growing broke faster than we ever have is because we've made bad decisions for so long in a row. And part of the reason why the health part is so damaging to us is because we've let our health go and we've had bad health care for too long. It's just unacceptable. The risk we take as a society by having these systems be poor is just ridiculous. The idea we don't have the ability to move the resources to make it all serve us is ridiculous. So your money is what is going to move those things in the direction that you want, one way or the other. So vote with your money all the time. Be conscious with your time and your energy and your money all the time. I hope you have a good week. I really appreciate your support, and We got a couple crazy weeks ahead of us, but there's a bunch of wild stuff that's coming down the pipe. I'm, nervous that these headlines are going to get wilder and wilder and wilder. Just always remember, there's more that unites us than divides us. So stay positive, stay bullish, buy stocks, keep your head down, love your neighbor, help somebody. If you're in a position of excess, do something to fill somebody else's cup up. Have a good week. I'll talk to you later.